Welcome, dear listeners, to another chilling episode of our scary stories. I am your host, guiding you through the labyrinth of fear and suspense, offering you tales that will send shivers down your spine. Tonight, we bring you a story wrapped in enigma, nestled within the silent corridors of a once bustling medical facility. As the sun sets, we traverse into a world seldom seen and rarely understood. Our setting: the Mercy Hospital, a place where the line between the living and the dead begins to blur as soon as the clock strikes midnight. So, turn off the lights, wrap yourself in the eerie silence of the night, and prepare for the ghostly night shift. But remember, sometimes the things that go bump in the night are more than just figments of your imagination. Nurse Avery stepped off the city bus, her gaze fixed on the enormous structure looming before her. Mercy Hospital, it was called, and its very sight exuded an eerie sense of desolation. The moon's silvery light washed over its cracked and weathered facade, highlighting the long shadows cast by gnarled trees and darkened windows. As she ventured closer, Avery could hear the whisper of the wind through the skeletal branches overhead, carrying with it the faint scent of damp earth, a quiet testament to the hospital's age and mystery. The air was heavy with a lingering mustiness, like old books left to molder. Despite the initial apprehension clutching at her chest, Avery steeled herself, reminding her of the reason why she was here, a young nurse with the hopeful goal of making a difference, however small it might be. Inside, Mercy Hospital was like a time capsule, its long, dimly lit hallways lined with faded photographs and outdated equipment. Avery could feel the chill in the air, a constant companion in this relic of a place. The echo of her shoes on the worn tiles was the only sound that broke the oppressive silence. Avery was greeted by old Nurse Clara for her job shadow, a kind soul with crow's feet etching her weathered face, serving as the hospital's unofficial historian. Their dialogue, brimming with hushed stories of the hospital, painted vivid pictures in Avery's mind. She spoke of strange happenings, lights that flickered without cause, soft whispers in the dead of night, a patient or two speaking to unseen companions. Each tale added to the growing sense of unease, of something lurking just beneath the surface of the ordinary. "Pay it no mind, dear," Clara said with a dismissive wave, her steel-gray eyes twinkling under the harsh fluorescent lights. "Hospitals as old as this one are bound to have their quirks." By the end of her first day, Avery couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched by unseen eyes following her every move. The hospital, with its long shadows and echoing silence, seemed to have a life of its own. The chill ran deeper than the weather, creeping into her bones, tugging at her instincts. But, with the dawning of the first night shift, she convinced herself that the eerie phenomena were just products of her overactive imagination, fueled by the hospital's history and Clara's tales. Under the velvety shroud of darkness, Mercy Hospital took on a more sinister guise this night. Long shadows stretched like spectral hands across the worn floors, and the waning moon, peeping through the cloud-laden sky, cast an ethereal pallor over the once familiar corridors. Avery's first night shift was about to begin. The night staff, a motley group of weary veterans and green newcomers like herself, filled the hospital's skeleton crew. Among them was Dr. Hawkins, a gruff man of few words with an uncanny talent for diagnosing the most cryptic of illnesses. Alongside him was Eli, a lanky janitor whose uncanny ability to pop up in unexpected places made his presence felt more than his quiet nature would suggest. As the hours melted into one another, the hospital's unsettling oddities became more pronounced. An inexplicable chill would sweep through a room, causing Avery to shiver despite the warmth of her sweater. A flickering light in an otherwise empty corridor would suddenly blink out, leaving her in a momentarily disorienting darkness. Emanating from the unseen corners of the hospital, she heard the echoing hum of voices too soft to make out, the spectral remnants of hushed conversations. In these daunting hours, Avery was tasked with caring for the patients that inhabited the dimly lit wards. Each one, with their unique ailments and personal stories, added to the tapestry of her nocturnal journey. There was Mr. Harmon, an elderly gentleman with no family, who claimed to have conversations with his long-dead wife, and Mrs. O'Reilly, a sweet lady who, despite her failing memory, often spoke about her nightly visitors. As she made her rounds, checking vitals and dispensing medication, Avery couldn't shake off the unsettling feeling that many eyes were upon her. The flickering shadows seemed to dance with a life of their own, and every creak of the ancient building set her heart racing. Yet she pushed her fears aside, attributing the unease to the strangeness of the hospital at night and her mind's natural tendency to craft narratives out of the unknown. Late into the night, as Avery found herself in the deserted corridor of the hospital's oldest wing, she experienced the most unnerving incident yet. A cold wind swept past her, making the lights flicker and sending a chill down her spine. A faint child's laughter echoed in the distance, its cheerful sound oddly disconcerting in the quiet hospital wing. She spun around, her breath hitching, but she found nothing but the empty hallway stretching behind her, its silence unbroken except for her own ragged breathing. Avery left the old wing, her heart pounding, her mind spinning with thoughts she didn't dare acknowledge. It was easy to dismiss a flickering light, a sudden draft, or even a strange sound. But a child's laughter in a deserted corridor. There was something deeply unsettling about that, something she couldn't explain away. As she completed her shift, her thoughts kept spiraling back to that moment. The ghostly laughter echoed in her mind, becoming the eerie lullaby to her troubled thoughts. The first night at Mercy Hospital had opened the door to a realm of the unknown, a world she was only beginning to understand. Little did she know this was only the beginning. Days turned into weeks, and Avery found herself growing accustomed to Mercy Hospital's nightly peculiarities. The chilly drafts no longer sent her heart pounding, and the spectral laughter became an odd, yet familiar sound in the silence of the early hours. But as her fear ebbed, curiosity began to take its place. She noticed patterns, little consistencies that tied the inexplicable occurrences together. Many of her patients, especially those who had been in the hospital for a long time, were different. They spoke of things that others didn't see and heard things that others didn't hear. Mr. Harmon would often speak fondly to his vacant bedside, while Mrs. O'Reilly's nightly visitors seemed to keep her company even when Avery couldn't see anyone there. Her colleagues often dismissed these quirks as products of illness or old age. Yet Avery couldn't shake off the feeling that there was more to it, something just out of sight, waiting to be uncovered. One evening, as the sky blazed with the vivid hues of twilight, Avery found herself sharing a quiet moment with Dr. Hawkins in the hospital's small cafeteria. Their conversation, initially centered around their daily routines, took a fascinating turn when Avery decided to voice her observations. The patients, she started, the words feeling heavy on her tongue. Have you ever noticed how they talk about things we can't see, things we can't hear? Dr. Hawkins, with a thoughtful frown, took a moment to answer. Hospitals, he began slowly, are places filled with both life and death, hope and despair. Such intense emotions can often manifest in ways that aren't easily understood. He paused, looking at Avery with a sudden intensity. Sometimes our patients see more than we do because they stand at the edge of both worlds. If you're open-minded, you might learn from them. Avery didn't fully comprehend the depth of his words then, but they stirred something within her, something that urged her to delve deeper into the hospital's uncanny mysteries. As days turned into nights, Avery began to pay more attention to her patients' stories and their behaviors. She asked gentle questions, listened to their cryptic tales, and began to piece together the eerie puzzle that was Mercy Hospital. Yet, it was the stories about the ones who never leave that intrigued her the most. According to whispers among the staff and patients, these were the ones who had stayed for too long, the ones whose spirits seemed tethered to the hospital. It was a mystery that tugged at Avery, its answers concealed within the hospital's labyrinthine corridors, just waiting to be unraveled. As Avery plunged deeper into the hospital's enigmatic heart, her routine became more unsettling, filled with strange happenings and eerie tales. But within these peculiarities, Avery found a purpose, a drive to uncover the hospital's hidden truths. Unbeknownst to her, this path would lead her to encounters beyond her wildest imaginings, where the line between the living and the dead blurred into obscurity. A strange revelation started to take hold in Avery's mind as the days passed, fueled by the surreal experiences of her nocturnal duties. A spectral world seemed to exist within Mercy Hospital, a world that mingled with their own, seen only by those on the fringes of life. Emboldened by this theory, Avery began to spend more time with the long-term patients, especially Mr. Harmon and Mrs. O'Reilly. Their tales, bizarre as they were, seemed to hold clues to the eerie phenomena pervading the hospital. One evening, Avery found Mrs. O'Reilly sitting upright in her bed, her pale face bathed in the soft, incandescent glow of her bedside lamp. She was talking quietly to herself, or rather, to an empty chair placed near the window. Avery approached softly, careful not to interrupt. "Who are you talking to, Mrs. O'Reilly?" she asked gently. The elderly woman turned her milky eyes towards Avery, a faint smile playing on her lips. "Why, my nightly visitors, dear. They're the nicest folks, always come to keep me company." Avery humored her, joining the conversation. "What do they look like? Your visitors?" Mrs. O'Reilly's face took on a dreamy expression. "Well, they are not quite like you and me. They flicker like candlelight, always in the corner of my eye. They whisper sweet stories, tales from another time." Avery couldn't deny the shiver of unease that ran down her spine as she listened, the hospital's silence amplifying the surreal narrative. She thanked Mrs. O'Reilly and excused herself, but not before noticing the empty chair rocking gently, as if someone had just risen from it. Later that night, she found Mr. Harmon, the usual twinkle in his eyes dimmed with sorrow. When she inquired about his mood, he shared how he missed his wife, how he longed for the simple joy of holding her hand. Avery, moved by his raw emotion, held his hand and offered words of comfort. As she did, she noticed his gaze fixed on the other side of the bed, his eyes brimming with a mixture of joy and longing. Avery couldn't shake off the feeling of being observed, of intruding on a private moment. It was an instance too intimate, too real to dismiss as a delusion. She left Mr. Harmon's room, her mind buzzing with more questions than answers. Day by day, the hospital's spectral world was revealing itself to Avery. It was unsettling and inexplicable, yet deeply fascinating. As she journeyed further into this realm of whispers and shadows, Avery found herself confronting a reality she had never considered, a reality where the world of the living and the dead weren't so distant after all. Her explorations were only beginning, and each whispered tale, each unseen presence was leading her closer to the core of the hospital's haunting secret. The hospital at night, once a source of dread, was becoming a mystery she was determined to unravel, despite the spectral shadows that lurked just out of sight. As Avery delved deeper into the spectral undercurrents of Mercy Hospital, her waking hours became a constant exchange between what was visible to the eye and what lay beyond the veil. Her dreams, too, began to echo the spectral whispers of her patients, filled with flickering candlelight apparitions and unseen companions. One day, during a break from her nocturnal duties, Avery found herself in the hospital's dilapidated library. A room filled with the musty smell of aged paper, the library was a place where time seemed to stand still. Here, she hoped to find a trail, a connection, that might explain the spectral phenomena at Mercy Hospital. As she sifted through dusty patient logs and yellowing newspaper clippings, she stumbled upon an article dated back to the 1920s. The piece told a tragic tale of a fire that had devastated the children's ward, claiming many innocent lives. The article carried a photo of the hospital with its towering spire, an eerie prelude to the tragic tale that lay within its walls. Suddenly, a detail clicked in Avery's mind. The old wing, where she had heard the child's laughter on her first night, used to be the children's ward. Her heart pounded in her chest as the pieces began to fall into place. During her night rounds, she found herself increasingly drawn to the old wing. The laughter she once found disturbing now carried a tinge of sadness. One night, as she walked down the dimly lit hallway, she heard the faint laughter again. But this time, instead of fear, a sense of determination filled her. Avery found herself whispering softly, "I know what happened here. I'm sorry for your pain." The laughter seemed to fade into a silence, then a soft sigh, like the rustle of leaves carried on a gentle breeze. A shiver ran down her spine, not of fear, but a strange feeling of connection. Encounters like these began to reshape Avery's understanding of her patients and their unseen companions. They were not figments of her imagination, nor were they threatening specters. They were echoes from the past, imprinted on the very walls of the hospital, their stories yearning to be heard. Avery's quest to comprehend the unseen world became a solemn mission. She was no longer just a nurse in a hospital. She was a conduit between the living and the spectral entities. As her understanding grew, so did her resolve. Unraveling the haunting secret of Mercy Hospital was not just about her curiosity anymore. It was a tribute to the unseen, the unheard, and the forgotten. But as she journeyed further into this world of shadows and whispers, the chilling reality became clear. The hospital was not just a home to these spectral echoes. It was their prison. And Avery was the only one who could hear their pleas for release. Their cries would lead her towards a truth more haunting than she could ever imagine. With newfound purpose and clarity, Avery dedicated herself to understand and acknowledge the ghostly residents of Mercy Hospital. Her interactions with her patients, particularly Mrs. O'Reilly and Mr. Harmon, took on a deeper meaning, often leaving her with a strange sense of melancholy. One evening, while attending to Mrs. O'Reilly, Avery decided to engage more directly with her unseen visitors. She could see the vacant chair by the window rocking gently, a sign of their spectral presence. Mustering her courage, she addressed the space. "I can't see you," she began, her voice steady, "but I know you're here. Is there anything you want to tell me? Is there anything I can do?" Silence fell over the room, the air growing denser, tingling with anticipation. A sudden gust swept through the room, causing the papers on the bedside table to flutter. Avery felt a shiver of exhilaration, a sign that her words were acknowledged. She continued her conversations with the unseen spirits in the hospital, hoping to understand their stories and, if possible, help them find peace. These spectral exchanges, coupled with her research into the hospital's past, started revealing a pattern. The entities were not malicious, as horror stories often depicted. Instead, they seemed tethered to the hospital due to unresolved matters from their life or tragic, untimely ends. The fire in the children's ward was a clear example. Avery felt a pull towards those innocent souls, their laughter echoing through the ages, a stark reminder of lives cut short and dreams unfulfilled. As she stood in the cold, empty wing, their laughter rang out around her. "I hear you," she whispered into the silence, her voice echoing through the abandoned hallways. Gradually, her fear of these otherworldly beings diminished, replaced with empathy and a sense of responsibility. She saw them not as frightening apparitions, but as lost souls, their voices echoing through the ages, desperate to be heard. But understanding their plight was just the first step. As Avery witnessed the spectral realities of Mercy Hospital, a haunting question arose. How could she help these tethered spirits find peace? How could she free them from the confines of the hospital walls? Her quest for answers drove her deeper into the phantom world of Mercy Hospital. Every shadow seemed filled with untold stories, every whisper a plea for liberation. The haunting secret was starting to reveal itself, but it was far from over. Avery knew she was on a path filled with whispers and unspoken fears, but there was no turning back. She had become the voice of the unseen, their beacon of hope in a world that had forgotten them. Armed with her newfound understanding and empathy, Avery started looking for ways to help the spirits trapped within the hospital walls. She dug deeper into the old records and patient logs, even delving into books on the paranormal and spiritual practices. During her search, Avery discovered an old journal hidden behind a loose panel in the library. The journal belonged to a nurse named Matilda who had worked at Mercy Hospital during the early 1900s. Matilda's entries gave vivid accounts of her experiences with the various spirits and her attempts to assist them. In her writings, Matilda described a ritual she had learned from her grandmother, a woman well-versed in the old ways and spiritual practices. The ritual, as Matilda described, allowed communication with spirits and helped them resolve their earthly ties, setting them free. Avery felt a spark of hope. Perhaps this was the key she needed. In the following days, Avery prepared for the ritual. She collected the required items as detailed in Matilda's journal, a bundle of sage for cleansing, a piece of quartz to channel energy, and a candle to guide the spirits. Avery could not shake off a sense of anticipation mixed with anxiety. She was about to cross a line, from observer to participant in the spectral realm. One quiet night, under the cold fluorescent lights of the children's ward, she set up the ritual. The sage filled the room with a smoky, calming scent as she lit the candle, its flame flickering in the otherwise still room. Holding the piece of quartz tightly in her hand, she reached out to the spirits. Her voice echoed through the empty ward. "I am here to help you. If you want to talk, I am listening." The response was immediate. A sudden drop in temperature, a soft whisper like the rustle of old pages, and the laughter of children, closer this time, almost as if they were right next to her. The spectral children of Mercy Hospital were responding. The conversation that followed was nothing like she had imagined. It was full of emotions, of longing for play, for love, and for release. The children shared their stories, their memories, and their unresolved dreams through sensations and emotions, washing over Avery like waves on a shore. By the time the sun began to peek over the horizon, Avery was emotionally exhausted but filled with a renewed sense of purpose. The ritual had worked. She had made direct contact, and for the first time, the spectral beings of Mercy Hospital were heard and understood. Avery knew the path ahead wouldn't be easy. But with every spirit she could help, every story she could complete, she was one step closer to uncovering the hospital's haunting secret and giving peace to the unseen. As dawn bathed Mercy Hospital in a soft, hopeful light, Avery realized that she was no longer just a nurse on the night shift. She had become a beacon of hope for those lost in between realms. Emboldened by her successful interaction with the spectral children, Avery continued the ritual with other entities within the hospital. Each encounter was an emotional journey, revealing stories of love, loss, longing, and unfulfilled dreams. Each spirit was unique, an echo of the person they used to be, their narratives adding depth to the spectral tapestry of Mercy Hospital. One night, Avery decided to conduct the ritual in Mrs. O'Reilly's room. The air was heavy with anticipation as she began, the familiar scent of sage filling the room. "I invite you to speak with me," she addressed the phantom visitors. "I'm here to listen, to understand." The air in the room grew cooler. Mrs. O'Reilly, who was in her bed, stirred slightly, a faint smile playing on her lips. Avery felt an overwhelming sense of warmth and affection, sensations that she recognized were not her own. Through a whirlwind of emotions and fragmented memories, she perceived the spirit's narrative. It was a tale of a doting mother who had lost her son in the war, her spirit clinging onto the material world, waiting for her boy to return. Avery held Mrs. O'Reilly's hand as the spectral mother shared her sorrow. She whispered words of comfort, reassuring the spirit that her son had found peace, that it was okay for her to let go. As dawn approached, Avery felt a shift in the atmosphere. The once heavy air seemed lighter, the dense sadness dissipating, replaced with a sense of calm and tranquility. Mrs. O'Reilly's smile grew more profound, her eyes sparkling with a serene light. "She's at peace," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "My nightly visitor has found her peace." The spectral encounters with the tethered spirits began to take a toll on Avery. Still, she pressed on, driven by the profound transformations she was witnessing. With every spirit she helped, she was not only untangling the haunting secret of Mercy Hospital, but also providing closure, giving the spirits a chance to embrace tranquility. Her extraordinary journey was reaching its climax. However, a sense of unease began to creep in. The rituals were working, the spirits were finding peace, yet a sense of unease lingered. Avery realized that the hospital's haunting secret was not fully unraveled. There was something else, a final piece of this otherworldly puzzle that was still missing. Even as Avery was making strides in her quest to assist the spectral entities of Mercy Hospital, an unsettling feeling gnawed at her. There was a persistent cold spot in the hospital, a space where even the bravest spirits seemed to shy away from, the charred remains of the old administration office. It was an area Avery hadn't explored yet, one that was kept locked and abandoned since the fire. Filled with unease but determined, Avery decided to investigate, hoping to unearth the final piece of the haunting mystery. One chilly evening, Avery stood before the weathered wooden door of the administration office. She took a deep breath, unlocking the door with an old key she'd found in the hospital archives. A rush of cold air greeted her, filled with a potent mix of burnt wood, damp, and a faint trace of old paper. The room was shrouded in darkness, the pale moonlight casting eerie shadows on the scorched remnants. With a sense of trepidation, Avery stepped into the room, her flashlight illuminating the soot-streaked walls and the charred remains of desks and chairs. She felt a wave of sadness washing over her, an echo of a tragedy long past. In the silence, she noticed a half-burnt painting on the wall, surprisingly untouched by the ravages of time. It was a portrait of a stern-looking man with an inscrutable gaze. Avery felt a strange pull towards the painting, an inexplicable connection. A quick search in the hospital records later confirmed her suspicion. The man in the portrait was the hospital's former administrator, Walter Carstairs. He was known for his strict rules and cold demeanor, and was rumored to have met an untimely end in the fire that destroyed his office. The next night, Avery performed the ritual in the old office, under the silent gaze of Carstairs' portrait. "Walter Carstairs," she began, her voice echoing in the empty room. "I am here to listen." The air grew colder as a presence filled the room. An intense emotion, a mix of guilt, regret, and sorrow washed over Avery. Through a flurry of spectral whispers and emotional currents, she learned Carstairs' haunting story. The fire was no accident. Overwhelmed by guilt over the hospital's declining conditions, Carstairs had set the fire himself, intending to end his own life, but tragically causing collateral damage. As the haunting confession poured out, Avery felt an icy chill run down her spine. The final piece of Mercy Hospital's haunting secret had fallen into place. It was a tale of regret and retribution, a tale that had doomed spirits to wander within the hospital's walls. As dawn broke, Avery knew what she had to do. The trapped spirits were not just victims, but also the consequence of a man's devastating guilt. As she walked out of the charred office, a new determination filled her. She had to help Carstairs make amends, to set free not only his spirit, but also those bound by his actions. After days of preparation and anticipation, the night arrived when Avery would conduct the ritual that could potentially release all the spirits tethered to Mercy Hospital. The daunting task before her seemed overwhelming, yet Avery felt a calm resolve. She understood now that her role wasn't just as a nurse, she was also a mediator between the seen and unseen. Under the watchful gaze of the moon, Avery set up the ritual in the charred remnants of the old administration office. The room was filled with the sage's cleansing smoke, and the candle flame danced, casting flickering shadows on the walls. Holding the piece of quartz tightly, she began the ritual, her voice steady and strong. Walter Carstairs, and all the spirits of Mercy Hospital, I am here. I bring you a message of forgiveness and release. You are not bound by past actions. You are free to find peace. The response was instantaneous. The room grew colder, a spectral chill hanging in the air. Avery felt the surge of emotions stronger than ever before: confusion, uncertainty, hope, and a deep, profound longing for release. To Carstairs, Avery spoke directly. Your guilt has been acknowledged, but it's time to let go of the past. You are a man of errors, like us all, but your punishment has far outweighed your crime. As the words echoed through the room, a shudder ran through the hospital. Avery felt a great rush of air, as though a window had been flung open, and a wave of peace washed over her. There was a collective sigh, a sense of release that filled every corner of Mercy Hospital. With the first light of dawn, Avery opened her eyes. The office was silent and still, no longer weighed down by the ghostly presence of its former occupant. As she moved through the hospital, she felt a notable change. The heaviness was gone. There was an air of tranquility and calm that had been absent for so long. Avery had done it. She had unraveled the haunting secret of Mercy Hospital and released the tethered spirits, giving them the freedom they had been denied for so long. In the days that followed, Avery continued her duties, her night shifts no longer filled with ghostly encounters. She still felt the memories of the spirits around her, echoes of their presence that would always be a part of the hospital, but the feeling was no longer haunting or fearful, but peaceful. Avery's journey as a nurse at Mercy Hospital had begun with fear, but it ended with understanding, empathy, and a profound sense of accomplishment. She had given the phantom residents of Mercy Hospital their long overdue peace, and, in return, had found her own. As the sun rose each morning, Avery no longer felt dread or anticipation for the night shift. Instead, she greeted each night with calm acceptance, knowing she was walking through quiet corridors filled with peace and resolution, a testament to her courage and compassion. The ghostly night shift had transformed into the night of release, a beacon of hope in the gloomy recesses of Mercy Hospital's history. And so, dear listeners, we leave the haunting halls of Mercy Hospital, our hearts filled with an eerie sense of peace. The spectral entities have found their respite, the hospital's chilling secret unraveled, and a brave nurse has helped guide the lost souls towards tranquility. Remember, even in the most chilling of tales, sometimes there's a beacon of hope, a glimmer of light that pierces through the darkest night. Join us next time on our scary stories as we delve deeper into the world of the uncanny and the unexplainable. Keep your curiosity piqued, but don't forget to check under the bed tonight. You never know what stories might be lurking in the shadows. This is our Scary Stories signing off for tonight.